Welcome to the latest episode of the Low Production High Value Show, a show for and about entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the latest episode. Today's guest is Matt Tait from Decibel. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, let's jump right in. So, I mean, what's interesting about your entrepreneurial journey is you began as a lawyer and you've made some transition now into an entrepreneur multiple times over. Talk to me about what the catalyst for that, or what was the shift in mindset, or was entrepreneurship always a lingering thing in the background, but you thought the safe thing was law? Tell me more about that time of the life.
Oh, a bit of all of that and none of it all at the same time. I think, for me, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs.
Okay.
In fact, I was just telling somebody the other day, we were at a family reunion this Labor Day over the summer, and there were 60 of us in one house.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it was a bigger like Airbnb rental. At one point, I looked around and I noticed that out of all the people there, 12 either were running or had run a large organization, and it's just been in my family. My dad owned his own business. My grandpa. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And when I was graduating college, I asked both my dad and my grandpa. I said, "Hey, what do you think I should do?" And they both gave me this concept, and it's something that I actually teach to kids and younger people that work for me is think about the first few years of your career as learning and adding as many tools as you can. And they both said, one thing that I think would be helpful is go to law school because it'll save you a hell of a lot of money on legal fees when you own your own business. I took that to heart and went to law school, actually
It does help to
became a
like
practice.
law, though, doesn't it? Or find it
It
interesting?
does. I find it to be, I don't find the law to be fascinating, but I find the concept of being a lawyer to be fascinating and kind of how you're taught to think.
Okay.
What law and legal training does is it teaches you to analyze massive amounts of information for a variety of potential outputs and to see all the consequences. And so you're able to look at a lot of information, which as an entrepreneur, that's exactly what I do today. And to be able to completely analyze all of that information very quickly and to come up with a series of potential outcomes and to weigh the risks on top of those. So legal training helped my very ADD brain be able to kind of take that as a funnel and create it into a more cohesive thought process. And that's why I found it to be very effective. I would also my wife will tell you the best thing about me going to law school is that's where I met her. And so it was valuable for that reason as well. But
Mm.
practicing law was always a step in the journey. It was always always wanted to be an entrepreneur, always wanted to run my own business. I'm a terrible employee. So it was all a stepping stone for me.
But just on that thread about being a terrible employee, I mean, you finish law school, you're to article and do your pay your due, shall we say. What was that like? Or were you just, okay, I just have to see this through and rip the band-aid off and then I can go be an entrepreneur? Was that the frame of mind?
No, I was naive enough to think at every step of the way, maybe I could make a career out of this. And I would say at every job I had working for people, I had about 3 months of that, where I was like, I will make a career out of this. It's going to be great. And then my mind broke after that. But I practiced law for a little over 3 years, and it was great training to work with some amazing people and to be able to act as a counselor. That was the big thing for me is lawyers are advisors and really kind of taking that to heart and thinking about it from the client perspective versus the advisor perspective. It's something that's kind of impacted my career at every step of the way. And I'm very glad that I had that opportunity. But I also, within a couple of months, really knew like, hey, I don't want to do this. The other
Mm.
thing my dad said was, hey, when you get a job, look at your boss and your boss's boss. Do you want their life? And it didn't take me very long to say like, hell no. And to then really think through that. But when you kind of reach that point, and I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, somebody that I'm mentoring, and I said, hey, when you reach the point where no is that answer, you have two choices. What most people do is they then get kind of angry or discontent and they treat the job as like, why me? And I said, you can do that, or you can treat it like a learning opportunity and be a sponge and say, how do I learn all of this stuff? How do I learn all the features of the role, all of the aspects that I need to learn? How do I, absorb as much information as humanly possible?
Is that
And
more
then
like
when
serving the job versus making the job serve you and your objectives?
Yeah, I think make the job serve you. I love that idea of, you're gathering information, you're gathering skills. Even as a lawyer, there was a lot of time management skills of really getting an understanding of how to prioritize my day that helped me to be a better employee and boss down the road. And so really taking the time to step back and say, all right, I'm gonna pull from this everything I can, and then when I feel like there's nothing left, that's when it's time to move on.
Well, I remember hearing an interview with the founder of Shake Shack on the eve of applying for law school. I think it was his uncle. He was talking to his uncle, and he said, the uncle was like, "So what's going on?" He goes, "Well, I'm thinking about applying for law school, but I'm not sure it's something I want to pursue." And the uncle said to him, "How long do you plan on being dead?" And he's like, "What?" He goes, "How long do you plan on being dead?" And he said, if you think it's going to be, just think about how long that we are no longer on this earth, and think about how long you're going to be on this earth. So you might as well
Yeah,
do something you enjoy, because after that the cards are not something you can play. So he didn't
yeah.
apply to law school. He went to Europe and went to a cooking school, and was mentored by a chef, and the rest is history. Shake Shack and the Union Square hospitality, the man's done extremely well
I
for himself,
think it's
pursuing his
all worked
passion.
out.
Yeah. Well, but I wanted to jump back to your reference to ADD and how common it is amongst entrepreneurs who thrive on new types of engagement in their work, new projects, new etc. Did you, when it came to practicing law, I mean, new cases are new projects, I guess you could say that, but from the standpoint of avoiding the boredom, the mundane elements of it, or frankly any job, did you kind of
Yeah.
take your own approach to it versus like, or adapt? Yes, there are best practices and common procedures amongst the law, but did you put your own stamp on it to make it more palatable for yourself during the time?
Yeah, I did. And I think that was an important thing that I learned in that role and carried forward, which is I actually took the time as I looked at those bosses and my boss's boss and I said, hey, what are the things that they do really well that would help me down the road if I could do them well too? And that's what put me in a position of as I'm doing things I didn't like. I mean, you have to do legal research and write like 100-page crap, and like it was terrible. I actually was able to look at it and say, like, what here is teaching me? What part of the journey can I find joy in, kind of sustenance in, and really pulled out of it? And I look, it particularly when you're younger, and for me it was hard. Like I had to actually every couple of weeks like take a step back and be like, all right, I'm doing this for a reason. Here's what the reason is. Here's how we're serving that reason. Because like there are times when you're just like, this really sucks. And that's okay.
Why am
But
I doing
like
this again?
to be fair, in my job today as an entrepreneur, as somebody running a 100-person business, I have moments where it really sucks and where I wonder, like, why am I doing this? Like, that doesn't change no matter what role you get in. You'll always, every once in a while, feel like the dog that caught the car.
There was a comment made to me by another a fellow entrepreneur who talked about the showing up at the office and looking around, and this was no disrespect to their employees, but they sat there and thought, from that gave them pause and said, I in some ways just exist to feed them. And so the joy of running your own business and the desirable outcomes for doing so had fallen by the wayside, and it was just like, I'm just showing up. I'm a cog in my own machine to sustain everyone here. She decided shut it all down, and then she now just has a collection of freelancers, not 100 people or anything like that, but the joy had gone. So the reason I bring all that up is when you talk about, yeah, there are some days that suck. So where do you do those, as you did in law, do you do those periodic pause for reflection, and as to the, as Simon Sinek says, know your why?
Yes, 100%. What I would also say is, as I've figured out what makes me happy and what's important, I've developed a lot more daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly habits that I do as a human being that help put me in the mindset to be happy. And some of them have absolutely nothing to do with work. I talk a lot with people that I mentor or even clients of ours about how important it is to be selfish. We think of that term as a really bad negative, but the reality is a lot of my job, kind of like that entrepreneur you talked about, is to pour into other people. I am here to be of service, to pour into other people. The minute I turn my computer off, I've got three kids and a wife that works. It's my job to help pour into them. And so I'm constantly doing things that are helping other people. In order to do that well, I've got to fill up my own cup. And so building the personal habits, and I talk a lot about how I think anybody that wants to be an entrepreneur should have three things. One is a focus on your own personal and physical health, whatever that means to you, doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Everybody's different. Number two is have a coach, somebody who gives you an unfiltered paid advice on how to be better and how you're doing and really help you analyze you. And then number three is finding a peer group, a group of people that are doing something similar that you can empathize with, that'll empathize with you, that you can talk to. Because these jobs are very isolating, and finding people that you can converse with, because at some point, particularly as your company grows, you stop being able to have 100% of all the conversations with the people in your company. Even me, I've got a co-founder and Jacob's awesome. I've got a COO, Michael's great. There are certain things that I just don't and can't talk to them about, and that's
Right.
okay. And having peer groups and a coach and then that focus on physical and mental health, whatever that is, that's what helps me be happy. And when I'm happy, it means that when I do that analysis of what makes me happy and what I enjoy and what gets me up and what makes me want to come to work and continue to build a company to be bigger and bigger, it means that I'm looking at that from an opportunistic perspective rather than a pessimistic
Hmm.
perspective. And I found that to be a good way to really look at it. And the other thing I think is when I was young, and I think a lot of people are like this, you get so focused on outcomes. I want to be successful. I want to be rich. I want to sell a company. I want to, whatever that is, that you stop focusing on how fun the journey to get there can be. And now that I've had success, I've had failure, I love the journey. I love the hard stuff, I love the great stuff, and that also provides a nice changing perspective.
I've heard a comment from the comedian Jimmy Carr where he said, "People will be jealous about where you are, but not the journey that you took to get there."
Yeah,
You
I think
know,
that's right.
well, and you talk about a coach, peer group, and so on. Does it manifest itself in like figuratively or literally your own personal strategic plan? Yeah, there's strategic planning for the business, but is there a strategic plan for yourself?
Yeah, there is. I do one for me as a, let's call it employee. I'm an employee of my company too. I like
Your own
to,
performance review.
I do my own performance review.
And do you
And I
exceed expectations?
Rarely. I'm actually
Okay.
very bad at like accurately judging myself.
Okay.
My team and my coach would tell you I do very well at taking criticism. I do very poorly at taking anything that's positive.
Like, as in you're uncomfortable
Yeah, I'm
with praise?
100% uncomfortable. When
Okay.
people compliment me, I get very uncomfortable and I want to move on. When you criticize me, I dive in, I don't get angry, and I really like enjoy how can I improve.
Like, tell me more. Where does this come from? Like,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah, but compliments I don't do well with. So I think for me, doing that self-assessment, like you mentioned, is has been really helpful. But also, I look at that as I have three major roles in my life. I am a boss, I am a husband, and I am a dad. And I do that self-assessment on all three areas of my life, and I think about how I want to improve and how they all work together. Because to me, I want to be a whole person, and I'd like to be good at all three of them. I rarely am. In fact, I suck at many of them quite often, but it is very, I found that to be a very helpful thing. And then to do a quarterly analysis of how am I doing? Should I change some objectives? Have some of the outside circumstances changed that I need to change the goals? Similar things that I do with the company.
When you talked about how, like, when you had colleagues when you were practicing law, and you were looking at them as your leadership and so on, and as an opportunity to learn from them, and perhaps be mentored them. Were you forthcoming about, I want to learn from you, I want to be mentored by you, even to the point potentially of revealing, I'm not long for the legal life as I'm going to move on? Or did you sort of keep that close to the chest and just,
So that second part, I totally never told anybody
okay,
because for them, if they're also thinking, who do I pour into and who do I mentor?
fair.
If I tell them I want to learn, great, they're interested. If I tell them I want to learn because I'm going to leave, different scenario. And so for me, it was just always been a curious person. I love asking questions. I love getting better. I love getting to the heart of things. And one of the ultimate things you find in law, and now that I run an accounting company, you also find in accounting is they are the like greatest people at continuing to do what has always worked. And that mentally, I tell my kids this all the time, like when you say this is the way we've always done it, it's an excuse, not a reason. A reason is something better than that. And I really started to learn that concept being a lawyer.
What was the, did it, was there something that happened in your work in law that was like, okay, that's, I don't want to be dramatic, but like that was the last straw. I got to move on. Or was there like the first entrepreneurial step? Was that percolating and it just became evident? I got to make the move. Like what was that switch?
No, there was a final step. It was a holiday weekend and I left at 4:30 to go with my wife and some friends on a long weekend trip. And on the drive, I got a call at 5 o'clock from my boss asking why I wasn't in the office. And I had told him I had put it on my calendar, I'd done all that stuff. But he's like, you know what? We are just always here from 8 to 6. And I was like, if I don't have anything to do, why am I here? And he was like, just the way we do it.
FaceTime.
Yep. It's butt in seat and it is just ridiculous. And that has never mentally worked for me.
It's the same for so many entrepreneurs. Like, is there time that we waste in our own business? Yes. But that's our conscious choice per se. But when you are just, quote, taking up space so that everyone
Oh,
can check a box, yeah, they were in the office, they weren't doing anything, but I feel better as a manager knowing that they were sitting at their desk.
it was funny. A couple of weeks ago, I actually saw that first boss, and we were laughing. And now I'm a client. Like I'm somebody that pays lawyers a lot of money every year to do things, and he was like, "Wow, it's amazing how your career, what's happened, and it's kind of a crazy path that you took." And I said, "Hey, I have you to thank for a lot of it." And I told him that story, and he just kind of looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, times have changed. Like now the pandemic, everybody can work from home and all of this stuff." And I said, "No, it was more the concept of there's also this concept of I think two things kind of go together. One is managers feel better if they can see, which I don't understand fundamentally. I can understand how people get there. But the other one is one that people want to admit, which is I had to do it, so you should too. It's this hazing mentality of work
Yeah,
that's totally wrong and bad and makes no sense.
and outdated.
And it's so outdated. But you see people that are like my age, and I'm just over 40 that still do the same thing. It's not just 50, 60, 70 year olds. It's like now I'm an old guy.
Well, the this whole return to office, a lot of it's just driven by the old guard with out of date thinking
Oh yeah.
I need to see my team because, well, selfishly, they're like, if I don't can't prove my value or my contribution as easily with people in the office, because I can't. It's becoming increasingly challenging to say, to prove it out virtually. Well, here's an archive of all my Slack messages managing people or my Teams chat, and it's this kind of, I think you're focused on the wrong things, folks.
Oh, I think 100%. I think the other part of it too is just looking at things as how do I accomplish a goal? And how do I create the type of culture that gets people to work together to accomplish that goal? And I think when you are looking, and a lot of these big companies, they used to have a great culture. Now they don't. And if you don't have a great culture, I would absolutely want to see everybody and have an office, like 100%. If you have a great culture, being remote is going to make no difference compared to being in office. If you have a shared goal, a shared set of values, key behaviors that people do, and if everybody believes in the same set of behaviors and values, your company will work just as well no matter where they are.
We'll be back in a moment. And now, a word from our sponsor. Social media has become an imperative for almost every business. Discover how to successfully implement an effective social media strategy that is supported and integrated throughout every part of your organization with this essential book from our host, Andrew Jenkins, Social Media Marketing for Business, Scaling an Integrated Social Media Strategy Across Your Organization, is now available from Amazon or KoganPage.com. Now, back to the show.
When it came to building culture, how much of it was, did you sort of like literally write down, sit down and go, this is what I want the culture to be, versus it developed organically and you recognize these are attributes stemming from my values that I want us to retain. This other stuff, no, I don't want that I don't want to allow it to become atrophied or to embed itself. So I'm curious about how much was by design and how much was like evolution from a cultural standpoint.
Bit of both. What I would say is I've always had a couple of key values and behaviors that are extremely important to me as a person. And as we built Decimal, I made that clear to everybody. One of the biggest things is responsiveness is something I'm crazy about. Like I hate having a lawyer or an accountant that I give a project to and I don't hear from for months and I have no idea what's going on and I've got to reach out to get an update. That's ridiculous to me. And then if I do reach out, it takes them a week to get back to me. Like it's a great way to not be my lawyer for very long. And by the way, I've got a great lawyer. I've known him since college. He's awesome. But
But
that type of
if I can just interject there, though, do you set expectations with them about how you like to be dealt with, or
I do 100%.
okay, versus you weed them out as they underperform or overperform?
No, I'm a very clear upfront. Passive aggressive is not in my nature, and I like to be very upfront. And going back to the company, we just kind of talked about like how we did things. We didn't write out our company values or key behaviors until about year two. Because kind of like you mentioned earlier, I wanted to see how the company would develop as well. And I didn't want to put a bunch of words on paper on a wall or a virtual screen that meant nothing to everybody. I wanted to see how the culture of Decimal would grow itself. And then after we'd reached a certain size and you kind of get to the point where like, hey, as a small company, myself or my co-founder were in every meeting and we're with people every day when we were a 10, 12 person company, then you start to not be able to do that. And that's, I think, when having company values that are really written down and behaviors that lead to those values become really important because you have other people teaching others how to do what you've been effectively doing in meetings the entire time. And that's when I sat the company, the leadership down, and I had them, we all came up with four core values. And then we came up with key behaviors that led to those values and that we thought were important determiners of those values. And then I had meetings with, we were at about 40 people at that point. I had 4 or 5 person meetings with groups of employees and we talk about it. What did they think? What did it mean to them? What were some examples they'd seen? And we used that to create a very clear kind of idea of what it was to be at Decimal and what it
Mhm.
meant to be part of our culture. And this summer, I actually got the single coolest story of how that's working. We had an intern, his name's JJ, and we'd never had an intern as a remote company. Like I wasn't sure how it would work, but we hired JJ as an intern, and I wanted to do an exit interview to see, like, hey, is this something we should keep doing? Like, how did it go?
Mhm.
And he told me, he goes, hey, I'm going to go back to, he goes to Butler University in Indianapolis, where I live. He goes, I'm going to go back to Butler Business School, and I think I'm the only returning intern that could tell his classmates every value of the company he worked for, because you guys repeat it all the time. You talk about it with your clients. They talk about it in meetings you're not in. You're talking about the values. When people do something great, they tag a value. Like I know all of Decimal's values, and I've only been an intern for a few months. And I was like, man, that means it's working. Like we're getting it right. Yeah. So that's kind of how we've gone about
Right.
it.
And did you have much interaction with him during his summer internship?
No, maybe one or two meetings other than that, and then some group meetings and stuff and
Right.
projects. But like maybe I think I did a one-on-one when he started and one midsummer.
But that speaks to, if you want to call the organization malleable, that you've got embedded within the organization, your leadership and their team, um, talking about, like, they're ambassadors, they're advocates for the
Yeah.
culture as an extension of what you sort of laid out. Let me describe something and see if it resonates with you. I've often believed, and you can disagree, that people will signal how they would want to be led. Some are high touch, frequent feedback. Others are, I'll come to you when I need you and give me enough rope, give me empowerment and trust. And I'm just wondering, one, does that resonate with you? And two, do you have examples in your leadership with your team of 100 of the, like, you've got a mixture of those types of people and what that's been like?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we talk a lot about is our goal is to create a good, safe place where people can feel challenged, that they can feel unique, and that they can feel like it's a place where they can work for a long time. Not everybody is going to be the same. And our differences are what makes us better than everybody else, not the fact that we have some homogenous group of people. And at the same time, though, you have to have some common threads. You have to have a core set of foundational elements, one of which is culture and values. The other thing that we talk a lot about is in a remote setting, every one of our employees is an island, and it's our job to build bridges between those islands. And you're right, some people need a lot higher traffic than others, but it's important to figure out how to do some of that together and to create team atmospheres for us to make sure that people don't feel isolated, even people that want to work alone. And I employ a lot of accountants, I've employed engineers. Those are two subsets of people that generally do okay being alone a lot.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that you want them alone all the time. In fact, quite the opposite. You want to pull them sometimes into the uncomfortable group setting, but you want to do it in a way that's authentic and not manufactured. And yeah, we do manufactured stuff. Like we'll do game days and like happy hours and like all the other stuff that you
Mhm.
kind of do to just laugh. Yeah. Our favorite is a Secret Santa that we do every year. And like people wonder, is it really a fun thing? And like, yes, we tell stories of like some of the hilarious, like exploding cakes and stuff people send.
You do it upright.
But more importantly, you're creating work. Like, how do you create shared work that gets people working together? And I was just interviewing a woman that started for us 30 days ago and I asked, like, how's it going? And she's like, she's 10 years into her career. I've never been at a place where people enjoyed working together so much. And the fact that we're remote is crazy. And she's like, I talk to my team members all the time. I've talked to people on other teams. Like, I'm constantly, when I need things in meetings, people are willing to help. And like, our team gets together every day. And like, we have these touch points. And I feel more connected than I have in any other role. And I thought that was a really good indicator of how we're doing at building those bridges between the islands.
But when you think about Decimal from, I'll call it conception to where it is now, I mean, there is a trend line in terms of like the values and your objectives, and I'll call it the core
Oh, yeah.
thinking of that path and the people related to it. But, you know, how different, if at all, one is the company from inception to where it is now, from what you originally conceived, and how much change staffing wise or team wise, or not? And I'm not talking about culture. I'm just talking about, like, getting
Yeah.
the
Team.
proverbial, getting the right people on the bus. That talk to me about that journey.
I mean, if we have 100 people today, we've probably hired 150, maybe 130. I mean, it took us a while, particularly when we went really quickly from 20 to 80, like really, really quickly. And
That can be messy.
it was very messy. And look, in all of these like building bridges and stuff, there were a lot of things we tried that failed. I mean, we talk a lot about things that I've done that totally bombed and what we tried had failed. And like, we fail all the time. I mean, one of our key values is move fast and make things better. inherent behavior in that is you will fail and that's okay.
Well,
Now,
but that's important to highlight because often Gene Littke from the Durndon School of Business wrote a book called The Catalyst. Okay, I'm going to go ask for $1 million budget with exhaustive research to justify it, and I might fail. Versus, can I get 10, $100,000 experiments greenlit so I can try stuff and fail
yep,
nine at a time and potentially avoid spending $2 million on a loss. But is that that kind of approach is
yes.
permissible within Decimal?
Yeah, I want you to try a bunch of little things, and if it works, I want you to try it more. I want you to teach everybody else. Like, I want you to share better. And I also want you to share failure, and that's okay. Like, we really do talk a lot about the number of ways I fail frequently, because I feel like that's one of my jobs, and part of my role is to normalize failure and make it okay. And if it's okay for me to bomb, it's totally okay for you to. Now, don't do it the same thing multiple times. Like let's not continue to
Yeah.
fail at the same thing.
Don't
But
show me you didn't learn.
right, fail,
Mm.
learn, do it again.
Well, are there certain categories have there been more failures about technology investment,
Oh
pursuing
yeah.
different lines of business? Like, is
We failed at building a technology platform that we really thought was going to get going, and it didn't. We've failed at trying certain things culturally. Like we thought we'd create a remote place where everybody had an avatar and you'd always be working, and it felt very big brothery, apparently. So we definitely bombed at that. It did not last very long. Like we failed at, thinking about there were certain groups. Like, did we need an implementation team, and what did that look like? And as we've really honed in how to do what we do better than anybody else in the world, part of it was we had teams, we had ways we did work, we had ways we organized technology that didn't work. And we've really gotten to a place over the last year where it's like, hey, we are cruising. And that's also a really weird place for me of saying, like, I got a board meeting in a couple of weeks. I'm going to say, hey guys, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. I've got nothing crazy for you on this part of the business. Like, they're just going to keep doing it, and we can scale the way we want to scale, grow the way we want to grow. And guess what? I also don't have to hire. Yeah. Those are kind of crazy things to think about, but it takes a mess to get there.
but now, as you said, like you're gonna meet the board and say, we're not gonna mess with anything. The growth is happening. We're gonna go status quo for a while. But where I'm going with this is, at the beginning, oftentimes it was founder-led growth. Now I'm
Yeah.
assuming you've got some salespeople, but also you
Yeah.
have history, you have reputation. So I'm wondering, where is the growth coming from now? Is it a combination of still your reputation, your own personal brand visibility related to the company, salespeople? You know,
No, most of it's sales. I mean, I do a lot of, I love having these conversations. I'll do a lot on LinkedIn. And what I found is that helps bolster Decimal's brand. But the vast majority of what we do today is like they don't let me do anything tactically in the business anymore. I'm not allowed to do anything. Um, I can't do accounting.
a bull at a china shop.
I am 100%.
Don't touch.
That's exactly that. I've got Michael, our COO, runs the business. Jacob, my co-founder, does a lot of the tech and strategy, and it's my job to just not break anything. And what I found though is we have a great sales team. We have built and trained an amazing group of people that do sales, that build our brand via marketing. We've also done partnerships. Like I love having an inclusive ecosystem. If you can't tell, like being inclusive is just the way I like to do things. I had a partner conversation yesterday with a group, and they were like, we kind of do what you guys do. Like, of course, we won't pitch what we do that competes. And I was like, I don't care. Pitch whatever you want. I think we do a good enough job that we'll keep them because we do a great work, but I want you to do your business. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to steal anything
Mhm.
from you, but I want you to do you. And they were like, really? I'm like, yes. If my team's not doing a good enough job and you're able to take it, that's their fault, not yours. I'm fine with that. And that's just kind of how we've always operated is we want to be that group that we win because we're better. And that's been a really fun mentality to build into the team.
When you think back to your own, we talked about personal strategic planning. As you said, you've got a COO, you've got the right C-suite structure in place for, and you're hands off. Do you see yourself extracting yourself even further such that you can venture into some other things that, feed your interests and your passions and where you want to allocate time?
So, yes and no. What I would
Mm.
say is what we're doing today as a core business is humming and that's going to grow. What that really means then is I'm going to add something entirely new and lead that and kick
Okay.
that off next year.
And without
Yeah.
revealing anything confidential, you have one or more ideas for that?
Oh yeah, and that's the biggest part of the board meeting is, hey, this is there, so we've got time and attention, the team's focused. Here's a new and that's kind of been the way that we've built Decimal is like, let's build this, let's get our core competency really well. Let's get good growth on it, and then let's and we'll do this, and then let's do that. Let's keep both going. Let's make sure they're going really, really well. And so that's been how we've really focused on building Decimal. And we've got a really big and coming up of, hey, ultimately, my mission and Decimal's mission are aligned. Our goal, my goal is to make it easier to just be a business. Decimal does that by doing the boring accounting stuff. A lot of my focus with people and content is normalizing what it's like to be a CEO, what it's like to be a founder, an entrepreneur. And there's a certain subset of people in the accounting industry that could really use a better community and better help. And we're going to leverage into that going forward and really use some brand new AI technology in the space to do some crazy stuff.
Hmm. On that idea of building and the and, whatever that and might be, when you're thinking in that area, how much of it is reflecting on what you think there, what internal capability you have to build the and versus acquire? And how do you go through that decision making process or evaluation process?
To me, if it's a what I would consider a small to medium thing, I love to acquire. In fact, I'm in conversations right now to acquire a firm that has an area of business that I'd love to start. That's a really good way to bring the skill set and in, and also it de-risks it because if you structure a deal in the right way, it means that you're really paying, it's paying for itself.
But
I
and
love that.
there's proof in the fact that they exist and have been doing business
Yeah,
for X number of years.
right. And so you're not building your failure points are different. And that's where I really like to add the small to medium things. When it's something big and it's something that is a first principles way of thinking through a problem that you're going to solve yourself, that's when I want to do it internally myself and hire into it versus acquire. And so that's kind of, I put things in three buckets: small, medium, big. Small, I can usually staff that and do that with my own team, maybe with a little higher. Medium, I like to acquire. And large is something that we're going to go after ourselves.
The when you look at an acquisition, as you said, there's elements of de-risk. And so you're looking at it saying, okay, my concerns about risk are addressed in the following areas. But then that's, I'll call it the quantitative start aspects of it.
Yep.
But we've talked so much about culture. Do you have a qualitative checklist or like how do you, I'm assuming you do, but like to talk to me about that.
I don't get to the equation unless I feel it's a culture fit. And then I actually sandwich it together. I'll use our first big acquisition was we bought a company called KPMG Spark from KPMG. And the first thing was, will this be a culture fit? And talked to a lot of the people in the team, talked to the people that were running it, said yes. Then you have the math question of, all right, what's the structure of this deal look like? How do we get it done? All of that stuff. Then if I'm going to finally sign off on making the acquisition and paying that money, are all the people going to be a good fit? And in that acquisition, during the diligence period, I personally interviewed every single employee at KPMG Spark twice. And my
Wow.
team did another two interviews. And that was one of my requirements. And KPMG was amazing to work with. They were like, that's totally cool. Like, we love that. They know we're going through it. Let's do it. And I wanted to see, like, where would you fit? What team would you be good on? Would you be good here? And that has carried through all of our other acquisitions where I look and I say, hey, if you're not going to be a culture fit, I'm not going to do this deal. I don't care how good the math is. If the people don't work, the deal won't work. And so I
But
start
was
there.
there a case though that, let's say, just for the sake of numbers, 100 people was part of the acquisition, 90 were going to make that be a
Yeah,
cultural
not
fit?
everybody came in.
Okay. And that was,
So
you're just being realistic. I mean, it's not for everyone.
it isn't. But what I also wanted to do was I wanted to think about them. And in my opinion, if I was going to make a hard decision that they weren't a good fit at Decimal, it was going to be better for them that I did it while they worked at KPMG than while they worked at Decimal. Because KPMG is a large organization is more incentivized to find them a better home or to make sure that they have time to find a new role. Whereas I'm a small company, I don't have the ability to give you 6 months of severance. I fundamentally would break my company to
Yeah.
do that. And so I wanted to have those conversations because, like you said, I knew it wasn't going to be 100% fit for everybody. I wanted to help them. And we talked to them about it too, of like, you're going to be in a better place that I've made this decision today. And it worked out well for everybody.
Well, and they have no disrespect to Decimal, but they have tenure under a well-known brand. And so
Absolutely.
to have had, let's say, 3 or 4 years at KPMG versus just a matter of months under the Decimal umbrella, not necessarily going to play out for them as best as possible. Just as we come to a close, you talked about sort of the three buckets or three aspects of your approach to your own personal strategic brand to support your own entrepreneurial efforts and leadership efforts. Any final words of advice you would give to an entrepreneur, be they at the beginning of their journey or trying to make some sort of transition further down the path?
I think, to me, curiosity and resilience are two characteristics that I think everybody should have. And I talk to my kids about it all the time too, of like, be curious, go learn, ask that question, ask it again. Like, keep asking, keep learning, like, understand how everything works and go learn. And then be resilient. When you get down, my kids will tell you when they used to fall off their bike when they were little, the first thing I'd ask them is, what do you do? And they say, get back up. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you will get knocked down a lot. You will have bad times. Sometimes it feels like you'll go through a week where 90% of the week was getting punched in the gut. But for those of us that love it, that 10% is more than what gets us back the next week.
Is how you
And
react to it.
yeah, so
Well, the proverbial or the cliche, I think Guy Raz asked that, but it's a question I like. How much of your success to date was luck combined with opportunity versus preparedness and planning?
50. You can't be lucky if you're not prepared.
Yeah,
So I think I was talking to somebody that ran the Olympic torch one time, and he goes, you know what? They gave me that opportunity. I couldn't have done it unless I'd been running my whole life. And I thought that was a pretty cool way to think about
very appropriate. And yeah, I mean, given an opportunity, it would have been sad to have not been prepared to take it on, to have
it.
missed that window.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation and
Me
everything
too.
you shared.
Well, thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Low Production High Value Show. Be sure to give us a rating and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out Volterra at volterradigital.com to learn more about how they can support your social media marketing.